like 0.1. You caught the ball. Awesome.
Yes. Don't laugh at me. I wish I knew this when I was 12.
My name is Kai, and I'm the founder and CEO at Rocket Academy. Today, I'm going to be teaching a friend and musician in Singapore, Joey, how to code, and I'm super excited. We're going to be sharing with her the most basic fundamentals of coding and some of the foundational concepts that coders use. And Joey's actually going to be building an app of her choice. She's going to decide what to build, and we're going to build it together. Hey, Joey. Good to meet you.
Yes.
Tell me more about your background in coding.
Basically, don't know much about coding. I have coded minimally late primary school years when I had a Neopets account where you can have a shop and then you use like code to add some background music or change the font.
Amazing. Wow.
Or like Blogspot. Yeah, I never coded my own template. I could figure out slowly. It was always very confusing to me because like you change one, you have to change another. I don't know why it appears so many times.
Yep.
You have to like try an error preview. You do the arrow wrong and then suddenly the whole block looks off. You need to go back and figure out where you typed the arrow wrongly again.
Did you have to go and research like what actually is this arrow doing?
It was just one of those like I guess you need to do arrow slash something and then it'll just
Okay.
I just saw patterns.
Okay, yeah. But today, hopefully we can demystify some of that syntax or some of those concepts that were happening. Hopefully it can share a little bit of insight into how coding works. So what would be interesting for you to build today?
I was thinking let's build like a food generator. So I love sweet and savory. One of my favorite things to do is eat an original Krispy Kreme donut.
Okay, nice.
With Chinese soup.
No.
The sweet, and then I take a spoonful of that. It just, I don't know. I really love that.
Okay. So I think what we can do is build an app that randomly matches two foods, one sweet and one savory, that can suggest what we could eat. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Okay. Well, we're going to start from the basics and we're going to learn some simple concepts in coding that will help us build this sweet and savory food generator app. We'll try and cover some of the more fundamental concepts that we need to know. So the first thing that we're going to cover is a concept called variables. Next, we're going to talk about a data structure called an array, also known as arrays when in the plural. They are used to store multiple elements of data. We'll briefly introduce some functions in JavaScript that will allow us to, for example, generate random numbers. Our app that we want to build is a food randomizer. And so we're going to have to somehow pick a random piece of data from the array. And we're going to talk briefly about a concept called functions. You don't have to worry about it too much today. It is just a way of organizing our code to make it more readable, maintainable. We are going to use functions in our app. And last but not least, we're going to cover HTML and CSS in brief, which is probably things that you came in contact with when you were working on your Neopets site and wondering why certain things were working or not working the way they were. These are the only 5 concepts we're going to cover today. And those are all the only 5 concepts we're going to need. Variables are a way of storing data. Before we get into the syntax, I just want to introduce you to this concept of storing data in a box. Let's say in my application, I need to store data. And so, for example, some of the data I need to store in this food generator application are the names of the foods that I want it to output for me, right? So let's say I have this box, and this box is let's call it my sweet foods. Let's list some sweet foods.
Ooh, yum.
You mentioned the glazed donut.
Yes. I mean, we could do chocolate, vanilla ice cream. Oh my God, vanilla ice cream and fries.
Okay. You can see that we've stored these names of these foods in this box. The box is the variable. So in my program, I need to label this box, right? And so I label actually on top with sweet food, but that's not the syntax of code, right? That's just English. And so in code, one word that we're going to use in JavaScript to create the variable is called const. So the syntax will look like const sweet food equals all this stuff that I want to put in the variable.
Okay.
Why is it helpful to have variables? One, of course, it allows us to store data inside of these so-called boxes, right? But the power of it is that it allows us to use these variables in other places. It allows us to update the variables, and we'll get more into that as we start coding. So I can do things like savory food, right? I can just, I don't know, wonton. There's so many, right?
Soup. Yes.
Okay. And so you can imagine when I need to output one sweet food and one savory food, I can just refer to these variables in order to give me the output that I want. I don't necessarily need to specify. Next, we're going to look at something called arrays, and it's related to the variables concept that we just talked about in the sense that arrays are like lists. Surprise, surprise that we're talking about lists because we are building lists of food here. So for arrays, the beautiful thing about arrays is that I can store one array in a variable. But within the array, I can have multiple words in it.
Sorry, you can store an array in a variable.
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, the variables introduction, especially when storing sweet food and savory food, now that was a bit simplified earlier. So really what it would look like is something like const sweet food equals this array. It wouldn't be this box here, right? In code, it would be represented as an array. And within my array, I would have those elements, right? It could be maple, and then the second one would be glazed, and then the third one could be chocolate. That makes sense?
I think so.
I can store unlimited, basically unlimited. I mean, there is a limit, but we're never going to hit it. Items in my array. I could go to honey, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? With arrays, we can access each of these elements using a number. So that's the way arrays work. And how do I know which number? You might think that maple is number 1, glazed is number 2, chocolate is 3, honey is 5, right? Would that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason with code, and this is true with most languages, arrays start from 0. So actually, this so-called index of the items in the array is 0, and it just keeps going on from there. So if I wanted to access the third element or the third index in the array, I would refer to the third index, and it would give me vanilla. And if I tried to reference the fifth element, it would give me an error because there's nothing there right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So syntax of arrays is going to look something like using square brackets, something we don't use as often when we're writing English, but is used quite often. So let's say this is sweet foods, right? It would look something like this: square bracket, and then each of these words or each of these strings would be in quotes separated by commas. And at the very end of the array, we would have a closing square bracket. So that's how we would represent an array, and that's how we will represent our sweet and savory foods later. So we're introducing random numbers because we need to pick a random element in our array, and we need random numbers to help us do that. There's no other way in most languages, in JavaScript at least, to do that.
So each number will be tied to a food, and then when that number is picked, it would present as the name of the food.
Exactly. So the math.random is a built-in function of JavaScript, and what it does, you see we use the regular brackets here. This incantation here is going to get us a random number from 0 to 1. It includes decimal. So it's like 0, can go anywhere, 0.165, as many decimal points. But what we need is not a decimal point between 0 and 1.
But we need the whole numbers.
But we need the whole numbers. We need the integers, right? There's another function in JavaScript. Again, we don't have to memorize the syntax, not important. Math.floor. Math.floor takes in a number, and so that's, I don't know, I call it x, right? And it gives us the floor of x. But basically, if I have a number like 0.1, basically it turns numbers like 0.1 into 0, or if I have 1.1, it's going to turn into 1. That makes sense?
Yes. Yes. You lost me at x.
Oh, okay. Sorry, let me
No. I got it. I caught the ball.
You caught the ball. Awesome.
Yeah.
So the cool trick that we're going to do here in JavaScript, we're going to combine math.floor and math.random in order to generate numbers between the range of 0 to the end of the array. So the trick that we're going to do to generate a random number from 0 to the length of our array, math.floor, and then I'm going to, inside of this brackets, which is supposed to put x, right? I'm just going to replace x with
math.random.
Random. So Inception, right? Math.random. And there's one more part of it. So I'm going to multiply it by the length of my array, which is array. And I'm using ARR here as my variable name that stores my array. Array.length.
Okay.
What do you think this will give us?
I'm thinking that this, because of the math floor, we will get the whole numbers, which will be the index that's tied to each name.
Yes.
And then it's going to be randomized because of the math random.
Yes.
And then because of the array length, it's going to include all the arrays that we have.
So let's say array length, right? Let's say I'm using, let's say I use my variable name above, right? Which is SF here.
Yes.
So let's say I replace ARR here with SF.length. Output of SF length, called it like this. It would be 5 because that's the length of my array, right? There are 5 elements in the array. And one quirk of math.random, it includes 0, but does not include 1. So it generates a random decimal from 0 to 999.9999999, but it will never include 1. So working from inside out here, starting from math.random times, what would be the range here? Math.random times SF.length.
If I say like, oh, the length is 5, then automatically coders would be like, okay, so it's technically 4.
So the indexes go from 0 to 4. Yeah, that's just something that, it is what it is. So math.random gives us a decimal from 0 to 1. And when I multiply that with 5, what am I going to get? What's the range of numbers that I could get here?
0 to 5?
Would it include 5?
Oh, no, it would be 0 to 4.99.
Right. And then when I call math.floor on that.
Oh, so 0 to 4.
0 to 4, right?
Okay.
And is that what we want?
No.
Why
Yes.
not?
Wait. Yes.
Why yes?
Yes, because in the index it's 0 to 4.
Exactly. right? We want with their only the only possible indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
All right. If I have anything less than that, it's going to error. If I have anything more than that, like 5, is going to error because there's nothing at the index 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
So code is just instructions, right? Code is like do A, do B, do C, right? Sometimes you can imagine some really complicated application like Facebook or something where there's like so many different things going on.
Oh my God, it's all code.
Yeah, it's all code, right? It's all code. I click a like button, right? There's like a lot of things happening underneath, right? It's got to like save that like somewhere. It's got to notify people. It's got to adjust the friendship score between the people who's posted and liked. It's got to do a lot of things. But if my code was just like a million lines of instructions without any groupings, you can imagine do A, do B, do C. Nobody's going to be able to read that. It's like impossible. Engineers are just humans at the end of the day, right? So the way we like manage it is we group them. For example, I could group this do A, do B, do C into like part 1, or I could be more specific, save the like, and then like D, E, F could be like part 2, which would be like send the notification. Last but not least is HTML and CSS. This is the fun part. And why do I say it's fun? Because it's more visual. HTML and CSS, these are the languages for visual coding, building user interfaces. JavaScript is also important for front-end development because it is the language. All 3 of these are used in every single website or web application or website we access from our phone. All of them are built on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Is it either or?
No, it's all 3 of them. Almost always it's all 3 of them.
Okay.
HTML is the structure generally, right? The structure of the user interface that we want to build. And CSS is the style. Generally, I would use HTML to say things like, okay, I have one paragraph here that says hello.
Oh, does P and then /P, is that closing the paragraph?
Closing it. Yep.
Oh my God. I wish I knew this when I was 12.
Oh, yeah. It's a markup language, which means that I'm just putting these tags before and after my words to mark it up, to like give it certain properties. And in my CSS file, I might define what style I want to apply to the class banner. So I would say dot banner, and then I would use the curly braces. And then I would do things like size. Size equals 20, color. I can now apply a style to whatever I put in my div. And I can apply styles to any of these as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions before we break?
No, I'm just very, very excited now.
Cool. Let's take a quick break.
Imagine coding hormones into a female AI.
That is a thing.
Is it?
So this next part, we are actually going to code that sweet and savory food generator app.
Yes.
And instead of me on the whiteboard or on the code, I think it would be mostly you sharing your screen and writing the code and then asking me questions. And then I might respond to your question by asking another question. And then we'll see how it goes. So you are here in Rocket Kai's random food generator. This is the starter code that I have created. Let me just introduce this setup that we have here. There we have it. We have the file structure on the left. We have the open file in the middle. And then we have the actual app itself on the right-hand side. The low-hanging fruit to just get started and get our feet wet is to change some of these words here, right? So generic words like my app title. The title tag in HTML is referring to, in Chrome, we have this title here in the tab.
Yeah.
And then everything in the body is what we see on this right-hand side here on the web page itself.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So first things first, let's change the boilerplate names to the names that we want.
Okay. If I do sweet and you can do symbols, right?
Yes.
Let's see. Oh,
Ooh, nice.
you can use symbols. Symbols. How fun.
Nice. Okay. So as you can see, it's very pretty bare bones. We didn't use any templates here. We didn't use any default styles here, except for that of vanilla HTML. Though that text is what we call comments. Comments are not executed in our code. They are just notes for humans to document what is happening in the code. They're very important because they allow us to understand the intention of the developer, especially for code that can be a bit more complex. Just to give you an overview of what's in the starter code, there is the array of savory food items, which we've put in one pizza here, but we want to add more. There's the array of sweet food items, which we put maple syrup, but we also want to add more. And then we have a basically empty function right now where we want to write instructions, which is why we have this to-do comment here. We want to write instructions for the program to pick a random savory food from the array, pick a random sweet food from the sweet food array, and then somehow display those 2 foods in this string here. So that when we click the button, those 2 foods will be displayed. Does that make sense what we want to do?
Yes.
So to start, I think we can change some of the variable names. So let's start with line 14, my button name, right? Like what do we want that button to do?
This is what we click to find out what to eat, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Naming is hard.
I'm just gonna do click.
Nice.
I'm just gonna say
Love it.
click.
Love it.
Okay, this makes more sense. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, generate. Okay.
Let's name our arrays.
But what would this help us like?
This is our list of savory foods.
This whole thing. So var name 1 is the list of savory foods.
Our name 1 is going to contain our list of savory foods.
Okay. I'm just gonna do savory.
But usually when we name variables, we use lower camel case in JavaScript. And let's add more savory foods into that array now.
How do I do that?
You can just add to it.
Also, the comma and then I just do this.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll do pizza, savory, soup, pasta, ramen. Ooh, fried rice.
Nice.
Okay, should we do 1, 2, 3?
As many as you want. You just can...
Ooh, curry. Curry would be nice. Now I'm getting hungry. Well, let's do curry. Fried chicken. Sushi, considered savory? Yeah, I think it's sweet and savory. See, sushi's like a funny, like little mix. Oh, we can do dim sum. Bread. How can I forget bread?
Okay, try saving the file. Let's do the same thing for sweet foods.
Ooh, maple syrup, chocolate, donut. Ooh, honey. Ooh, gummies. Yum. You know what's really good? Strawberries and bananas in salad.
Oh, what?
I'm not even kidding. I almost cried. It was heavenly. It
I
doesn't.
feel like we need to include salad on the top now.
Oh my god, yeah. I'm gonna do salad instead. Oh, Nutella, nice. Vanilla ice cream.
Kaya?
Iron.
Kaya? Like kaya toast?
Oh, it was like iron. I was like,
Oh, iron. No, I was like, what? Okay. Okay. So let's clean up line 27.
I'm just gonna add Biscoff spread. Yum.
Okay.
All right.
So let's say I want to access the third element in savory foods. So I'm going to have savory foods and I'm going to use square brackets and I'm going to put in the number of the index that I want. So if I do this, what do you think should pop up when I click generate?
Ramen.
Yes, exactly. The third index is the fourth item, right?
Yeah.
So if you save and you click generate.
Ooh.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you're spot on. And so same thing if I want to do sweet foods and get the...
Is this where we do the random thing?
Yeah, well, we're about to, but I want to show you how to display the array elements in our app before we get to the random thing.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So I change it to sweet foods. Now if you save and you generate, what should pop up?
Fruit.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's how you display one item at a time. But what if I wanted to create a string that instead of using a fixed value like Joey, what if I wanted to create a string that incorporates elements from my arrays?
Like both sweet and savory.
Yeah.
You do plus.
Okay, I could do that. So Joey wants to eat plus.
Plus then savory foods.
Yeah. So savory food 0 plus and plus sweet foods and then something like 0, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's save that, see what it comes up with. Oh,
wow.
I forgot the space after before. Okay.
Oh,
Right.
that sounds really good. Pizza and maple syrup.
Oh, it does actually sound pretty good. So we now have our array of savory foods, we have an array of sweet foods, and we know how to display those elements on when we click the generate button. Now I'm going to leave it to you to pick random elements from each array and then display them.
I need to code the randomizer.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I took notes. Oh my god.
Okay, all you.
Okay. I
Reference
see
the
what you
variables
mean.
in the
Okay.
string.
Okay, so generate one random savory food and one random sweet.
Yes.
So now I need to... What are all these spaces for? I'm so confused right now. Don't laugh at me!
Oh, sorry.
I was taking notes. That's just YOLO.
Yeah, no harm in trying things. If it doesn't work, you'll see an error and then you can work backward from there.
Wait, why is the X outside? It's supposed to be inside. Okay. Let's see what this does. Let's save it. Oh, nothing will happen. Wait, what happened to this?
So as we can see, right, something happened such that there's something wrong with our app, right? When you click the generate button, nothing's coming out. You also notice that there's some red squiggly lines underneath some of the things there, right? So usually the red squiggly lines mean there's something wrong with the syntax. And usually if we hover over them, it'll give us a hint. But there's another way in which it makes it easier for us to detect what error happened, which is what we call the console, the wrench icon.
Generating food is not defined. Syntax error missing after argument. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. This is welcome to being a software engineer. So it's telling us basically that there's something wrong with our syntax on line 32.
Yes.
I can help a bit. So just as a brief explanation of functions and calling them. Every time we call a function, math.floor and math.random are both functions, we need to follow that function call with matching normal parentheses.
Okay.
You can see that math.floor has an opening one but doesn't have a closing one.
So I need another one here.
Your closing one, right? So okay. How would you check that we calculated the right thing or that we generating the right thing?
Wouldn't it show? Oh, now it doesn't belong anywhere.
Right, we didn't put it anywhere on the screen, right? It's just
Yeah.
It's nowhere.
So then, okay, hold on. Function generate food. So the output in here, we need
Okay,
to.
we can change our output. Yeah.
I need to do this.
You could also say const random savory index equals and then the math.floor. And then in your output, you can just reference random savory index instead of having to do the whole calculation.
Yeah. Okay, wait. So const random savory index equals, and then this just like that.
Yeah. So then you've stored your calculation into this variable or this box called random savory index. And you can access the value of that by using the phrase random savory index wherever you want.
Well, this is just savory. So I'm just going to replace
Okay.
this. No, I have to still do this.
Yeah, exactly. You're a natural.
Don't say that too good. 6.
Okay, press it again.
Whoa!
Okay, does it do what we want?
Yeah.
It does, right?
I don't want numbers. I want.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to the next step.
Should we do sweet first or amend the numbers?
Up to you.
Let's amend the numbers to make sure that it works. Then we can just replicate for sweet.
Okay.
Okay. So now it's oh my god. Here. Okay,
Okay.
so we need to replace numbers with savory food.
Okay, nice. I love it.
Okay.
These kinds of descriptions really help other engineers understand what we're trying to do.
So now we need to replace the randomly generated numbers with savory food options, which is here. So, how do we do that?
I'm gonna ask you the question back.
Okay, so
I'll give you a hint. The numbers are linked to the items or the elements in the array because we specified that the numbers can only be maximum the length of the array here. They're already linked. So whatever number is generated in random savory index, I can just get that food at that index in the array, and then I would have generated a random food.
wait, say that again.
Whatever index generated, I can just feed that index into my array to get the word at that index.
Okay, how do we do that? Is this a matter of
Oh, and I'll give you a hint for how to do that. We're already doing it on line 39.
Okay, wait. This
That's just the index, but in the next one, sweet food 0, right? We're getting the word at index 0.
but it's only 0.
Yes. So what if I wanted to get the food at the index that I generated? One example of retrieving a food at a specific index is on line 39, where we say sweet foods, the item at index 0 of the sweet foods array, in which case it's maple syrup, right?
Yeah.
What if I replace 0 with 1? What would it give me?
Chocolate?
Okay. What if I replace it with 2?
Donut?
Yeah, okay. So what if I replace that number in the square brackets there with the random savory index?
Then it would randomly. Oh my god. Okay, wait. Okay, so hold on.
Okay, what would that do for us?
I don't know. I'll just have to see.
Hmm.
I'm thinking that it will. Yes!
Does it make sense what that is doing?
No, it makes sense.
Explain to me why it makes sense.
Now what we are putting is we're referencing the savory foods, which is here, and then the action is that we're making it random, and this behavior is here.
Right. So what is the value of random savory index?
Value? Random savory. Well, any of the 10 here.
Any of the 10 meaning numbers, right? From 0 to
9.
9. Yes. So it's a specific number between 0 and 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we are specifying on line 39 is that we're telling the computer, give us savory food at that specific random index, which is a number from 0 to 9.
Yes.
So at any given time, we're only giving it, actually, it's just one number. It's just like savory food 0 on line 38, except instead of 0, it's going to be some random number between 0 and 9.
Now we're gonna, so this is that, and then we need to label that. And then we need to do this again with sweet food and random, I think. Soup and honey. That's a little odd. Pizza and fruit, yes. It's like just as a tart. Yes, it's easy. Ooh, oh my god.
We did it.
We did!
We did it. It works.
It works. Now we just need to make it pretty.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're just done. It was so much fun. It was also very stressful, but so fun. We ended up with a bit of a Miffy food generator. I'm gonna make some improvements and we'll see. I think this was such a great experience. Kai was such a good teacher. Honestly, I asked so many questions and I was getting very carried away with the design of things, but he was very nice and patient with me and he was like, okay, let's do that later. Also, I wish that we could apply math floor to everything. Like, if a product is $4.99, I should be paying $4 and not $5. You know what I mean? I had dinner yesterday and it was $11.99 and they rounded it up to $12. What's that all about? We should use math floor. I'm gonna start inserting math floor into... Anyway, if you've been interested in coding and always wanted to give it a try but you're scared because you don't know how difficult it's going to be, I assure you that with a good teacher, it's so digestible. If I can absorb coding, I'm pretty sure you can too. Even in just the short 3 hours, you managed to accomplish a full generator that's functioning. I think that's insane. I'm so excited to finish up my little thing. I'll show you at the end what it looks like. Thanks so much for watching again. A big shout out to Kai again for being such a great teacher. I've been doing a bit of research on Rocket Academy. They have a 100% placement rate and I think that is so impressive. It could have been 110% and they math floored it to 100%. It's still 100%. I think Kai is regretting teaching me math floor right about now. This was really fun. Thanks so much for joining me on my journey today on learning how to code and creating a food generator. Hope this inspires you to learn something new. If you've been interested in it, give it a shot. Maybe it's coding, maybe it's not, whatever it is. I hope you had fun watching this, watching me suffer. If you're a professional coder, then I hope you had fun laughing at me and my attempts. It's okay, because we can all laugh at me together. Bye!